Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week it seems like it's still dumping everywhere. While I called the season a couple of weeks ago, I'm jealous of all the Powell days that are still in my feed. And it makes me think back to when I had Glenn Plake on the podcast, and he said long ago that ski season doesn't start or end because ski media tells you it starts or ends. It starts and ends because of snow, and right now, there's a lot of it. The funny thing is that we get our ski and snowboard mags in August, and then they stop coming in around December or January, it feels like. And that's when the season is just getting going. This is a minor problem in the grand scheme of things, because the snow world doesn't revolve around print media. No one does these days. But it would be awesome if the norm was to start later and end later based on snow, like Plake said. And while that's advice from one legend, it's time to get into a podcast with another living legend, a pioneer in the big mountains. I'm talking about the incredible Wendy Fisher. And when I started doing my research on Wendy, I started thinking, man, this podcast is going to be very similar to the Jeremy Nobis podcast, as the outline is very similar. She was a badass racer who didn't do as well on the U.S. ski team, and she wasn't really stoked on the U.S. ski team, and then she moved on to be a pioneer in the big mountains. That's kind of Jeremy's story. But Wendy's story is so much different than Jeremy's, and I guess that's my job, to ensure that without forcing it, all of the podcasts tell a different story. And after doing my homework on Wendy, I realized that her story is similar, but it's also totally different and totally awesome. And before we get into it, I want to ask you to tell a friend about the podcast, and if someone asks for a podcast recommendation on social media, please suggest the Powell movement. It really does help the show grow. Also, if you have any questions or concerns for me, hit me up at mike@thepowellmovement.com and I will get back to you. Finally, please support the amazing brands that make this show happen. They are Rollerblade, Elon Skis, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's talk with Wendy Fisher. When you were at your prime in the big mountains, you were on Solomon and you shot with Matchstick, and it seemed like you were tight with Dean Cummings. Dean is a legendary skier who's in prison for murder. Did you used to ski and travel a lot with him?
I did, yeah. And whenever I talk about Dean, I tell everybody I loved skier Dean. He was amazing. Definitely the first film trip I ever did with Matchstick, he was there, and I had great experiences with him. I think I probably skied with him for like the first 3 years of filming with Matchstick.
And back then, if you said Dean was crazy, it was a good thing for what he was doing. But did you ever see him cross the line anywhere other than skiing?
No, and again, that's why I say skier Dean, because business Dean up at the heli operation was a totally different Dean. But when we were out in the mountains skiing, he was playful, fun, very encouraging to me. I really looked up to him and I enjoyed traveling with him. He was super easy to travel with. He worked hard. So I really appreciated him. I thought he was a great friend. I really liked him as a person. But then when you got to Alaska and to H2O, and maybe it was the stress of running a business and everything, but he was such a different person, not great to be around. And I felt this shady kind of mysterious side that was not the skier Dean that I knew. So I feel like, yeah, I totally can look back and see a shift of him from the years that I spent time with him. And it was really sad to see.
And when you hear about the trouble that he's in now, is it something that you're totally shocked to hear about? Or is it something where you're like, well, there was definitely some red flags when I was up at H2O and I'm not totally shocked that this happened with Dean?
Well, murder, yeah, I'm shocked with that, for sure.
Yeah, that's a big one.
But yeah, he was being talked about. It was being ticked away. Like, even when Matchstick, we were planning on going up to Alaska, it's like, I don't think we can go with Dean. He is too difficult to work with, and it's so challenging. So yeah, as years went on, you could see a change, and maybe we should have seen it coming. It was just getting so intense. And then you would hear stories about him with other encounters with people, and yeah, you're just shaking your head like, what's going on? Like, he needs to get a handle on it. But yeah, of course, now it's like, why didn't we intervene or do something? But I only saw him a few times a year. the people who saw him more often probably saw a bigger change happening. But yeah, it's sad. And who knows what you could have done about it.
It's funny that you say, why didn't we intervene? But it seems like in these sports, when people go off on their own tangents or whatever they're doing, it's something that motivates them. And most people don't step in to intervene, regardless of what it is. I've never really heard of an intervention within action sports where it's like, hey, you need to stop. I'm sure there's Bam Margera. They had some interventions with him with drugs and alcohol. But with Dean and his personality, it's like, this dude's 50 years old. It's like, he's already lived a life. You're not going to change his behaviors. And is that why people don't step in to intervene? It's just like, let's let Dean be Dean, and then eventually totally goes off the rails?
Yeah. And, I've never done an intervention. I don't know how that all works. It just seems really hard because you're calling someone out on their personality.
Exactly, yeah.
Everyone has things that you want to change in them. So, to go up to Dean and be like, hey, we don't like how you're managing business and you get so stressed, and I can't put myself in his shoes running a business like that. And the Valdez territory got crazy, like who could get the permits. And I mean, you could have probably done a documentary on behind the scenes of the Valdez life and terrain battle that they all go through. So, I do still think of Skier Dean a lot. I'm really glad I got to experience him in that way. And I always will respect him and have a big place in my heart for him as that person.
All right. Well, enough talk about Dean. This is all about you. And you were born and raised in the Bay Area, and the Fishers were a weekend warrior family from the get-go, it seemed like. Did you guys put 8 hours a weekend in the car to go ski every weekend in the beginning?
Yeah, definitely. I was born outside of Davis, California, and my parents would make the trek, I think it was about 2 hours to Tahoe. They would get a cabin with some friends in Alpine. And yeah, we would do the schlep. I was the youngest of two older brothers, and that just became our routine. I don't remember the drive and all that too much. We moved to Lake Tahoe when I was 4, so I was definitely little when all the traveling was going on.
And it sounds like you moved to Tahoe at that age because when your oldest brother, was skiing, life became easier for him. He might have been ADD or something, but getting him on the mountain put him in a better place in life. And your parents realized that at an early age, and they just packed up the whole family and moved to the mountains because that was what was best for everyone?
Yeah, I think there's a combination of things. One, they kind of got sick of the commute. And then, yeah, my oldest brother, Mark, was very athletic. He did all sorts of sports and thrived in them. And he was dyslexic. And when we would go to Tahoe in the winters, apparently the teachers told my parents that he seemed to improve in school in the wintertime. And then my brother also told my parents that all he wanted to do was ski. So with all these different sports he was getting into, skiing was all he wanted to do. So with all of that information, they decided to move us up to the lake, and they put us on the Squaw Valley ski team.
Does your dad have to leave his job for the move, or does he spend his weekdays in the Bay and then his weekends with you guys?
So they moved everything to Tahoe. My dad bought a few office buildings in Reno and managed them. But then when my grandfather passed away, I think I was about 8. Anyway, he owned an office building in San Francisco by Candlestick Park. So when that happened, my dad got rid of all his stuff in the Lake Tahoe area, and he started managing the office building for the family in San Francisco. So for the next 28 years, or I don't even know how long, he would commute to San Francisco. So I only saw him on the weekends.
That is just a crazy thing to grow up with, like a weekend dad. It's like you're a divorced kid, but you're not because your parents are together, but you only see your dad on the weekends.
Yeah. And he was a weekend warrior. Like, he would come home super late at night. I might not even see him, and say it's the summer, because we grew up water skiing and snow skiing. So the summer, he would wake my brother and I up at 6 a.m. and get us out on the lake by 7. So we'd have glass water and water ski. In the winter, he'd get up super early, take one of us to whatever race we needed to get to. He never sat down and rested. It was all about us on the weekend. And yeah, it was crazy, but that weekend time that we had made him larger than life. So you didn't really feel like you missed out on the weekday portion of it. But yeah, I was super impressed. I remember as I got older, I asked my dad, I'm like, why didn't you move us to San Francisco? And he said there's just no way he was going to take us away from the mountains.
Oh, that's pretty cool of him.
Yeah.
And you took me to the house that you grew up in, and your parents did well, obviously, if you had a building next to Candlestick Park. And the house you grew up in is a beautiful place, but it also looks like one of those places that's constantly in danger if there's fires around, and I guess that's part of your whole community. Did you guys ever have any close calls or just like live in smoke every summer?
No, I mean, I would say last summer was probably the sketchiest that they had. And I went to visit them with my kids, and one day was perfect bluebird weather. And the next day, you couldn't even see the trees off the deck. It was so smoky. So I think that was the first fire that I felt it was threatening. Like I called them and I evacuate them, but they were on the totally other end of the lake, the North Shore. And so they were fine. But yeah, I think about fire all the time. It's definitely scary. My mom growing up, how you have the fire drill, like run out of the house. My mom would always say, when you run out of the house, grab the photo albums. She would always remind us of that. But we would talk about it a lot. Like, if we ever catch fire, grab the photo albums.
How about in Crested Butte? Is there fire danger there as well? I mean, is everywhere you live somewhere where you have to worry about your house catching on fire at some point?
Yeah, for sure. We live in a woodsy area, but not our house necessarily. Like there's not as many trees around the house I live here in Crested Butte like in Tahoe. I mean, Tahoe is just surrounded by trees. But here we have lots of space. I mean, I don't want to say that there'll never be a fire here, but I feel like in a lot of places in Colorado, it's a decently safe place. I mean, we're really high up. We probably have more moisture than most places. And I feel somewhat safe here, but yeah, I'm never going to write it off. Fires have already started right now, and we're only in May, which is crazy.
Yeah, it is insane. But growing up for you, it's all about chasing your brothers around. And is that what you remember, is always wanting to be doing what they were doing?
I don't remember always wanting to do what they were doing. I think I just thought I had no other options. I don't remember talking about it. My parents dropped me off at squaw. I guess, I was a mighty mite, and I guess the squaw team used to come in for lunch and take off their boots, and I'd line up all their boots while they were eating lunch. And I was just so engaged with the team that Paul Arthur, always noticed me, and he'd be like, get Wendy's stuff on to have her join the team to ski this afternoon. Because I was the young one, and I wasn't quite aged to be on the Squaw Valley ski team. But he would always pull me into the team. No, and this is stuff that my parents told me, of course. And apparently he would tell everybody not to pass me, and then I got to follow Paul. So Paul Arthur was the coach for the Squaw Valley team, and he just always included me. I guess when I was 6, he had the whole team climb the Palisades, and my oldest brother grabbed my skis, and my middle brother Craig grabbed my poles, and I climbed up the ladder, and my parents were at the bottom. And I guess they put my skis and poles down on the snow, and I clicked in, grabbed my poles, and just left and started skiing down the run before everybody else. So, yeah, I just remember being included. I remember loving it. And I just didn't really think of any other sports. I don't think I knew other sports existed.
Back then, when you were being included, you were able to participate in all the games that they played on the mountain. And this is where I'm going to bring up a terrible part of your childhood, unfortunately. But it's the Wild West back then. They're playing games on the mountain. You're playing a tag light game on the mountain, and something happens to your oldest brother, and I think he dies on the spot. How do you find out about that?
Well, yeah. So we were playing a game called Fox and Hounds, and that's where you have one fox, and he wears a scarf around his neck, which doesn't sound very safe either. And then we're all the hounds. We're chasing the fox. And so I guess if you catch the fox, then that hound becomes the new fox. And I mean, again, I was 7. My oldest brother was 13. My middle brother, Craig, was 11. And I was the youngest, just trying to keep up, go as fast as I could to keep up with the team. And so I saw a teammate get on a chairlift, and I got on right behind her. And she turned around and said, "Hey, Wendy, your brother fell." And so she waited for me at the top, and she took me to him. And I remember skiing up, and he was laying there, and I skied right up to him. And I looked down at his face, and I saw his lips were blue. And I don't remember talking about death or ever thinking about death, but the thought and the realization that he was dead popped into my mind right away. And I remember thinking he's dead. And then I hear someone say, "Who's this little girl?" And the girl who took me said, "This is his sister." And his response was, "Get her the hell out of here." And I remember people taking me away and skiing me down to the bottom. And, sadly, it's, because I was so young, it's still one of my earliest and strongest and most vivid memories of my life that I still think about daily.
Man, it's so crazy. I can't imagine that kind of loss. And how does it change the whole family dynamic? Because you guys are all so young and such a unit, and like you've moved to Tahoe for your brother and you guys as well. And I mean, it's devastating, I'm sure, to everyone, but like, does it change everything moving forward with the family? Are you guys just like quiet sitting around each other for like a year and not knowing how to interact with each other?
I don't remember that.
I guess you're young, yeah.
Yeah, I was young. My parents, they did take my brother and I to see a therapist for a little time, about it. But my parents were adamant that we didn't stop skiing. That's the main thing I remember. They always said it's not the sport. It's an accident. Accidents happen. My grandparents told my parents, they felt that we should stop skiing. And my dad told them that if Mark got hit crossing the street by a car, do we not let the kids cross the street again? He's like, that's not how it's going to be. So we had Mark serviced up at the top by the tram and Shirley Lake. So we had a service there. And then that spring or summer, we took his remains up to the same area and we just dug a little hole. And so he's buried at the top of Squaw.
Oh, that's special.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Warms my heart that he's there. And like when I was just there at Squaw for the PMS, I didn't really need to go to where he was buried. I felt like I didn't have time. I was rushing around having fun with the event and seeing friends and everything. But I just felt being there is kind of his whole aura is there for me.
And given you might not remember this as a 7-year-old, but is it something where as you start getting older, you just want to focus more on racing to kind of carry on in your brother's name, something that he loved to do? Or is racing all for yourself?
Well, racing was all for myself. I truly loved it. I enjoyed racing and being part of the team. And, back then it's with the squad team. Yeah, we raced and we trained, but God, we free skied a lot. Like we just played. And I just remember loving skiing and having so much fun. But I would say through time, his death started to impact me more. And I think as I got older, I started to think a lot about it more. I had a girlfriend who I went to high school with, and unfortunately, she had a bad ski accident, Laura Flood. And I remember a coach calling me and telling me about her death. And it just made me so sad. And I couldn't stop thinking about her. And a few days later, I realized, oh my God, I don't even think about my brother that much anymore. I need to start thinking about him. And so I made an effort to think about him all the time. And it really, really put me in a dark place and really made me sad and emotional. And also adding to that dark place, I was already in a dark place myself to begin with. So adding his death into my already, I guess, mental side that was kind of already down and out just really put me in a spiral downward. And so I was starting to ski poorly or race poorly. And I would think about him a lot. And when it was getting to the time to actually think about quitting ski racing, it made me very, very sad because I just felt like I was letting him down. This is what he wanted to do. So it definitely got to me for sure. And I laid a lot of weight on my skiing success being for him. So I don't think it started that way, but it definitely evolved into becoming pretty heavy in my life, why I skied, and kind of attaching his love for it and his death for it, probably why I still do it today.
So that happens a lot later in your career, the darkness, I feel like, because when you're just young, you're not even thinking about that so much because you are too young to process everything. And really, you're the tiny one, too. I'm guessing that you're the cute little redhead who's a racer who wants to be the best, but you're just so damn small. Was that kind of how your childhood was?
Not at all. One, I was not a cute little redhead. I think I was really dorky and awkward looking. And actually, I mean, I did think about my brother's death. I used to think of death all the time on a daily basis. Not necessarily of him, but death. Like, what does death look like? Am I going to be reincarnated? Am I going to go poof and become nothing? Am I going to be living up in a cloud with all my friends? I mean, I would go through the scenario almost on a daily basis. I would talk to my brother all the time, asking him to show himself. Like, I always wanted a sign. So, it didn't really affect my skiing yet, but no, I thought about death all the time. I remember going to Star Wars, and when all the Ewoks were dying, I came back and I remember crying so hard. That movie just affected me so bad. Now, I think I've thought about death every day since then. And then skiing, I never thought about becoming the best. I never tried to become the best. I just skied. And it just worked out in my favor that I became good. I mean, I must have had some kind of hunger, I guess, but honestly, I wanted to just have fun. And fun was at the start with my girlfriends or guy friends and laughing and goofing around. And then I'd get in the starting gate and I'd ski down and, oh, wow, I did good. It was more that personality. And unfortunately, that's how my personality remained for most of my career, which I feel it ended up hurting me in the long run.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start things off with Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. This summer, make Peter Glenn your one-stop shop for all of your fun needs. Think everything you'll want or need for wakeboarding, inline skating, hiking, swimming. You get the idea. Peter Glenn has the best brands at the lowest prices. And if you find a lower price from a reputable storefront, Peter Glenn will match that price. There's a reason Peter Glenn has been around for over 60 years, and that's because they're the best. To find out more, head on over to peterglenn.com. My next sponsor is Rollerblade, and they pretty much invented the sport of inline skating, and it's no surprise that they make the most comfortable, high-performance skates out there. If you're already a skater, check out the fit and finish of the 22 Rollerblade line. It will have you skating further and faster than ever before. If you're a new skater, Rollerblade has you covered with skates that are engineered to keep you comfortable, having fun, and most importantly, in control. To find out more about the 2022 offering, head on over to rollerblade.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, the brand famous for that iconic bottle that kept your grandfather's coffee hot and his water ice cold. Well, Stanley still has that bottle, but they also have everything you're going to need this summer to go camping. Nothing else matches the quality of Stanley, and like your grandpa's water bottle, the camping cookware will last you a lifetime and create the memories that Stanley is proud to be a part of. I'm going to save you 30% on all of your Stanley gear. That's the best deal you're going to find anywhere. Head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and enter the code DRINKFAST. That's all one word, all lowercase, when you check out, and you'll get the Powell Movement deal. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. So you never had that just like, I'm going to slit your throat competitiveness that the top elite people have on race day? That was never your style?
No, never. Never, never, never. Mm-mm. I'm not competitive. I know people think I'm super competitive, which I am. Like when the gun is like, go, when you hear 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, or the gun go off in any sport, cross-country running, I'm never thinking about I'm going to kick someone's ass or have that hunger or rage in me. No, that was never me. I was more wanting to joke around and play and wrestle. And then going down the course was just the added part of the day.
It seems like you like the underdog mentality. Like when we were at the McConkey recently, people were telling you that you were going to win, and it almost pissed you off or annoyed you because you were like, no, don't say I'm going to win. There's no chance I'm going to win, because you wanted to feel like you weren't going to win just because you were going to win, and you did end up winning that event. But it seems like you like to take the position of the underdog because you can surprise people, and it takes a lot of pressure off your shoulders.
Yeah. I've never been a cocky person. I've never been that person like, oh yeah, I'm the best. Oh, I'm the best in the world for what I do, or I'm going to win. No, I've never been that way except for one time in my life.
Can you tell us that one time?
Yeah. So this is related to my brother. So like I said, I've always wanted a sign from my brother. I've always wanted to believe in ghosts and hope that he would show himself, which never ever has happened. Because you just hear all these stories of people feeling their loved ones or seeing them and all this stuff. So I'm always like, I want that to be me. I want it to happen to me. But anyway, it was my first Worlds up in Alaska, and I'm going into the third and final day, and I'm winning. I remember being at the top going for my last run, and all of a sudden I thought to myself, I'm like, I'm going to win this. And I reprimanded myself for that thought. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just thought that. That's so on me. But I felt this energy that just made me feel and know I was going to win. I don't know. It was just different, and it was beyond me, I felt like. And to me, it just kind of gave me a feeling or a sign that my brother approved or he was happy. I don't know. So it's never happened again. But if there's ever a moment I thought I felt something special or unique, out of the box feeling, it was then, and I did win. So I just hold on to that because I've never, ever, I just never think I'm going to win. It's not a thought in my head.
Well, when you grow up at a mountain of rock stars, I'm sure it's hard to always be in the top or win all the time because people are pretty amazing where you grew up. And who were the skiers that a lot of us know today that you ended up growing up with and were just your peers?
Well, so ski racing, because there's so much in squaw, but ski racing, it was Heidi Stontiner. She was from a big family, the Stontiners, who many of them were on the U.S. ski team and great skiers. And we ended up being on the U.S. ski team together. And when I was younger, she always beat me. I guess I asked my parents, like, why is Heidi so good? And my parents responded by saying, it's in her genes. And then I asked, well, where can I buy those genes? So anyway, I looked up to her and I chased her to try to be better. I left at 13 to go away to high school to a ski academy in Vermont. So, I kind of lost touch with my squaw friends. I'd only see them in the summers, but I kind of lost touch just because then I went East Coast and was racing there.
How about McConkey? Because when I knew him, he was an adult and he was just like you saw him in the movies. He was really spontaneous, but also calculated, funny. He was the center of attention. But you ended up knowing him when he was a kid, I feel like. What was he like then?
Well, yeah, we were on the Squaw Valley ski team together, and we have a funny photo that, my ratty red hair is in front of his ratty blonde hair. And I think I was 7 and he was 8, something like that. And so I've known Shane my whole life. It's crazy because when he passed away and I started to really think about our history together, I realized that maybe I had probably seen him every year of my life from that age, from around 8. We always crossed paths. Now, whether we hung out all the time or whatever, we just always crossed paths. He's always been a part of my life, which is so crazy. And so when we're on the Squaw Valley ski team, we didn't hang out a ton. The only time I really remember him the most is when he poked his face with a bamboo pole into his cheek. And I remember he was bleeding on the ski slope because of that. So I just wouldn't say that we hung out a ton during that time. I really got to know him more when we went away to high school because he went to Burke as well. So this is why I'm saying I've seen him every year. We're on the Squaw Valley ski team together. Then we went to Burke together. Then even after Burke, we PG'd together there. And then we were in Boulder together because I went to summer school in Boulder and I had run into him at Boulder. Then I started to go home. He moved back home to Tahoe. And then when I was on the ski team and went home for Christmas and holidays, I would run into him at Squaw and ski with him. And then when I got into my free skiing career, he was at the very first contest I ever did. And then, I guess people know more of my free skiing career where we ended up filming together and traveling around. Then we went to Portillo and worked at the Superstar camp together. So, I just always crossed paths, but our relationship really didn't start progressing until I would say our post Burke years. And when I say Burke, I mean Burke Mountain Academy, which is where we went to school together. So I wouldn't say that we were pallowing around at Squaw skiing together all the time.
But you guys knew each other forever, and then eventually you guys became great buddies because of the history that you had together and then the fact that you're traveling the world together. He was a really funny guy. He did some insane and stupid shit that made people laugh really hard. Is there one great, funny, laugh out loud Shane story that you have?
Oh, gosh.
I know, put you on the spot. I should have prepped you.
Totally put me on the spot. Laugh out loud. Well, I want to say it was a laugh out loud, but it was scary and intense. But it was so Shane. It was when we were at CU and one of our teammates or classmates had a motorcycle. And so I got on the motorcycle with him and it's nighttime and Shane's on his rollerblades and he grabs on the back of the motorcycle and we're ripping around Boulder with him on his rollerblades in the dark with gnarly streets holding on this motorcycle. And I just remember being like, holy shit, this is crazy. I can't picture one thing because he was just fun and funny all the time. He lightened the mood. I remember when we were in Portillo, he had Chris and I put on his parachute and taught us to fly. So we were at the top, and you couldn't do this in the US, but we strapped on his parachute and we're at the top of the mountain, and he put a radio on me and he had me ski down, and the chute went over my head and I flew down the mountain to the bottom of the lift, and he skied underneath me, radioing to me, pull your right hand, pull your left. And I mean, that was just so cool. Oh, we went up to, I forgot why we were in Hood together, but we went, I think it's the salmon or white salmon outside of Hood River. And it was some other classmates again from Burke, and we got inner tubes, and we start floating down the salmon inner tubes, and totally crazy. And I'm not even a good swimmer, so this is really stupid for me to be doing. Then we get to this big waterfall drop, and we all pull out, but Shane keeps going and rode that. And we used to ride the Boulder Creek River together in inner tubes. So that, yeah, there were a lot of fun times.
Never a dull moment with McConkey?
No, not at all.
But back to your ski racing, it sounds like by the time you were 12 years old, or I think 7th grade or something like that, you pretty much win every race in a season. I mean, there might have been a loss here or there, but not that I was able to find. Is that true that you one year just dominated a whole year?
Yeah. My last year there before I went away to high school, I pretty much won every race, and it was so weird. Again, I remember not enjoying winning the races because I felt like people didn't like me because of it, because I was winning too much. And it made me sad. So again, I wasn't at the start trying to win because it actually didn't make me feel good in the end when I did, because I just wanted friends. That was more important than winning to me, to make sure that I had a camaraderie going with other skiers.
So with race, it's not like you're trying to win. It's just something that happens. You're winning every week. But I feel like there's a lot to do with your work ethic as well, because you were telling me a story about how your dad would come home from working. He'd be on a work trip or come back from, wherever his building was downtown. And he'd show up and you and your brother would be watching TV, and he'd be like, hell no, you're going to go outside and start doing interval training. Is that what drove you to have such a strong work ethic and love working out? Was your dad not letting you relax much?
Yeah, it was me sitting alone watching TV, which I did often. I watched a lot of TV. And yeah, my dad walked in the door from his drive up from San Francisco and sees me sitting there on my ass. And he's like, what are you doing here? Get out and do bike intervals. And of course, I tell a story and my dad will be like, oh, I never did that. Where you come up with this? But anyway, it's my memory. And yeah, they got me a trainer when I was 13 before I went away to high school to start training, because you have to do rigorous tests to get into school. But no, when I was younger, I mean, for sure, I worked out, I ran cross country and stuff, but I don't think it was my strength. I was never the strongest skier on the ski team. I was not really into lifting weights. I mean, I did. I just never was capable or had the drive to lift really, really heavy weights until, I guess I have to say, after I graduated from high school, I went to Sacramento to spend the summer with my brother to water ski there. And my dad was like, well, we need to find you a trainer so that you work out. And my brother's like, well, there's the Sacramento Kings here. So my dad went to the Sacramento Kings trainer and asked if I could train with them. And I was the only girl training with all these guys who were like 6+. I would show up to the weight room and do all the workouts with them. And my weightlifting changed to more powerlifting and I guess maybe CrossFit style, where you do lots of sets and your reps get really, really low. And then, you're building on the weight. And I actually gained 20 pounds in 2 months.
Holy crap.
Yep. And I ate like a horse. I mean, I don't know if horses eat a lot, but I ate so much food. But that unfortunately had a horrible effect on me. It was the strongest I ever was. And I remember going to a ski team camp in November, and they did a weigh-in. So I got on the scale and I saw that I was over 150 pounds and I used to be 130. And I remember my coaches being psyched. They're like, yes, because I just bulked up and I was so strong and my muscle content just was huge. But the thought in my head was no effing way. And I developed the eating disorder after that.
You actually put it into the timeline a little bit better, because I knew that there was an eating disorder that we're going to talk about. But you're not even in high school yet, so we're going to jump back a little bit, because your brother goes off to high school first. And for him, it's like you guys are both ski racing, And your local school's not doing you any favors. They're like, hey, if your brother misses more than 7 days, he's going to fail out of school, and your family has to do something about it. So they find Burke, and he ends up going off to boarding school at Burke all the way on the East Coast. When he moves to Burke, is it really strange for you? Because it's the first time you're at the house by yourself, and I would think life gets a lot more boring really quickly.
I mean, I missed him for sure. Like, we would ski together and stuff, but no, I don't know. I was kind of a loner in that way. And it definitely did make the house quieter, but I was so young. Again, we're like 3 years apart. So it wasn't like we were doing tons of stuff together other than skiing. And then I knew I was going to have to follow his footsteps by going to a school, which happens to a lot of people still to this day. Skiing is not a school sport. So if you can't find a school that's willing to work with you, you have to go away, which I'm so glad I did. I loved my experience. I really felt like I thrived in the East Coast environment. I know a lot of people are like, how could you go east? I honestly didn't miss squad during that time because I truly loved racing. And I know people who are in the free skiing world find that odd, like, oh my God, racing is boring. And that's what I got here. Like with my kids racing, other parents would say, God, isn't racing boring? I mean, you just do the same thing over and over. I'm like, not really. Like, it's really cool to get better. And, courses are always different and feeling yourself improve every run. And I truly loved it. And so being back east with those conditions and that level of competition was good for me. And it's crazy that I even survived or did well, because even though, like, going back to that season after I won all those races, my parents went to Burke and the headmaster told them that I mostly likely would not last more than 2 years. So maybe don't even send me, because even though I was good in the West, in their eyes, I didn't have a chance because I was entering a class of girls, the best girl from Canada, the best girl from Maine, the top girl from Boston, top girl from Chicago. And even though I was a good skier from the West Coast, I was really teeny and petite. I had zero muscle, and they just didn't think I had a chance. And they told my parents that. Thank God they did not tell me that, because I think it would have totally messed me up. So I'm cluelessly just at Burke now, working out, doing everything they tell me to do. And in my second year, I end up making the U.S. ski team.
Which is insane. But what's more insane to me is that you move out of your house at 13 or 14 years old. I mean, I have a kid. I know you have 2 kids. One of your kids is, living in France and going to school now, or he did that this year?
Oh, yeah. He's going to school in Teen France to a school called Apex 2100. And yeah, it is hard. I miss him dearly, but what keeps me together with him being gone and so far away is that I loved going away. I know it's hard to send your kid at 13, but I honestly didn't miss my parents, and I didn't miss squad. I didn't miss anyone. I was super psyched to be in a new environment. I was psyched to be with a bunch of kids working out every day with the same mission to just ski. So for me, it wasn't hard. I'm sure it was hard on my parents, but definitely was not hard on me. And I look to those years of ski racing back east as some of my best.
I mean, it's like you move out of the house like a college kid would at 13 or 14. That's the crazy part to me. But when you get there, is it culture shock? Are you a fisher out of water, per se?
Yeah, I mean, it was intense because I was intimidated by everybody. I didn't know how I would hold up in terms of running every day, because we had to run and doing our workouts and skiing. My personality, this is how I see myself, is I am shy. Once you get to know me, I'm outgoing and I have this hyper personality, but at first I'm very shy and reserved, and I'm kind of a people watcher, and I just wait to see where I fit in. So it was super intimidating, but slowly I worked my way through having great friends and proving myself as a really strong athlete. That gave me confidence in that way. Academically, I was horrible. So being a bad student and struggling in school, I thrived in athletics, and that was my happy place. And so to be at a school where we had to work out all the time, that made me feel better about myself.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and while ski season is coming to a close, Elan Skis is still supporting the show because they know how important the history of this sport is. What's important to me is that you do your part by checking out Elan's site, looking at their products, and demoing a pair next season. Once you do try an Elan ski, you'll end up buying that pair as the quality and performance of Elan's products is unmatched. I'm sure you've started to see more and more Elan skis at your local hill, and the reason is because they are more fun and they're going to make you a better skier. To find out more about everything Elan and their skis, head on over to elanskis.com. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They've been brewing the best beer in the Pacific Northwest since 2006, and they've been banging the drum about drinking 10 Barrel outside ever since. But they don't just go outside and drink. They support athletes like skiers Kate Zelef and Lucas Walks and snowboarder Ben Ferguson, mountain biker Carson Storch, and many, many more. And they don't just pay these people. They give them beer, and they create content around them for all of us to enjoy. If that's not enough, 10 Barrel's Clean Line Seltzer has the perfect bubble recipe and flavors, and their cocktails in a can pack a punch. I love them. To find out more about 10 Barrel, head on over to 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. How did you do with all the structure? Because when I look at Tahoe, it's like there's a ton of freedom there. Your coaches are probably taking you all over the mountain all the time to make sure skiing is fun, but you're also on the race course as well. Not saying that's not fun, but all of skiing is fun, and your coach is there and making sure you're experiencing everything. I would think when you get to Burke, it's more focus on racing because that's what that place is all about, and there's a ton of structure with it. You're going to be here at this time, doing this at this time. And how do you do with structure?
I do great with structure. Yeah, structure for me was fine. I didn't mind people telling me what to do. You know, the coach was like, you have to get up at this time, you're going on a run, then you go to school. And I was on autopilot, and I was not one of those athletes or people who put up a fight about that. And even though Burke had a lot of structure, we also had a lot of freedom. Their motto and the way that they raised us at the school was the honor code. You know what's right and wrong, so do the right thing. You know, drinking's wrong. You know, drugs is wrong. We just expect you not to go to that level. But we would run around the campus. We would do all-nighters sleeping out on the soccer field. I thought it was a big playground, and I loved it. And I didn't think there was a ton of structure in terms of them watching over us all the time and telling us to get in our room. And I never felt bossed around. But I also wasn't a troublemaker. I never did step out of the boundaries. I never thought about drinking or doing drugs. And there was a bust at our school during my time there. A bunch of kids went out drinking and I think smoked pot and took mushrooms, and I was clueless. And honestly, I remember thinking that I was so glad I was clueless because I didn't want to be one of those people who did that and got caught. I was really happy just being a kid, doing air bands, dancing, just common kid things, sleeping on the soccer field, playing silly games. Like we used to play this game called Killer, and we turn off all the lights in this dorm called the Woods House. And supposedly there's a ghost in the Woods House that people have seen. And you pick a card and you're the killer. So all the lights are off and it's 3 stories and you run around and the killer chokes the person. And so you just put your hands around the person. And when you do, you're not physically choking them. But I used to be really good at that game. And that was really fun. So I was a kid. I wasn't looking to get into trouble. I wasn't really feeling like I was being held back from living this life of wanting to drink and do other stuff. I pretty much just stuck with the program and didn't really go either way in, the direction of wishing I did other things outside the box.
Well, it's a good thing because it sounds like you said, in your second year, you make the U.S. ski team. And I believe you make the team by winning the world championships. Is that what puts you on the team?
Gosh, no. Wait, where'd you get that? I made the U.S. ski team because, I was just having consistently good results.
You have to have a certain amount of points to make it, or is it just a combination of results?
Yeah, a combination of results and your points. Back east was a really strong field, and I was consistently placing in the top range. So then, they look at athletes, and you go to U.S. Nationals too, and Junior Olympics, and how you place in Junior Olympics and stuff. Where I think you're thinking of one of those races was in 1991, they had the U.S. Nationals here in Crested Butte. And that's when all the top U.S. skiers get together, and some Canadians and other people from other countries if they happen to be here. But it's usually a competition to, highlight the American skiers and who's the best. And so that year, I placed fifth in the downhill, second in the Super G, second in the GS, second in the slalom, and I won the overall title. And it was the first year that they passed out cash prize money because we were amateurs and we were never allowed to accept money. And it was the first year, and I won the most out of everyone on the team. So that was a great race series for me. But in order to make the ski team, it's just, they always have scouts looking out at who's the top racers of the moment. And yeah, you just work your way up onto the team through your points.
Well, you said something that piques my interest. It was the first race where you could win money. I love money. How much money were you able to win on that first race, or in that first one where you could get a cash prize?
Oh, God. Unfortunately, it just wasn't very much, which is the bummer. I think it was 1,300 or 13,000. I was looking for the picture. I have it somewhere here. I can't find it. But yeah, it was, more than I think AJ Kitt was someone who was on the picture of winning the money, and Evert Tredokins. But yeah, in the scheme of things and how much prize money people get today, it was not very much. And it was terrifying in taking it because deciding to take that money was ruining my college eligibility to race NCAA.
Oh.
Yeah. So, I was giving up a lot. And I remember it was very, very stressful because I'm now deciding that I'm going the distance as a ski racer on the U.S. ski team and giving up my chances for a free education to ski at a college, which I already had a scholarship at CU. But I deferred, and I was deferring for a few years. So that right there, you're deciding to end your college ride in that way, which is a shame because the Europeans can come over and they make money, and the schools didn't really care because they didn't research the background of whether that athlete made money or not. So the U.S. skiers really get screwed.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Does the money change ski racing, though? Does it make it more exciting for you? Like, hey, I'm going to get paid at this race?
Well, yeah, for sure. Money's nice. Why not get paid? It's a shame that you're putting yourself through an expensive sport, and it's expensive back then, and now it's even way more, that earning that money just helps you be able to continue your dream and your lifestyle. So being able to have money, definitely the chance to winning helps a lot. And also, the reason it happened is because all the NBA basketball players, getting into the Olympics, it was an amateur sport. You weren't allowed to make money to be an Olympic athlete. But now the rules have changed. So why should all these guys who make so much money be able to compete in the Olympics and still make money, yet all us other true amateur athletes can't? So I think it was the right move and a good way to go.
And I bring this up a bunch in different podcasts because it seems like, especially lately, a lot of people have achieved their goals at a young age. But when you're younger, I would think the goal is to make the U.S. ski team and go to the Olympics. And when you achieve your dream of making the U.S. ski team at 15 or 16 years old, that has to be wild. Holy shit, that's my goal. Do you stop and reset new goals, or are you just kind of confused? I'm here now. What goes through a kid's head when you achieve that goal so young?
Oh, gosh. Well, I was a horrible goal setter, and my dad and I used to get in arguments all the time about this because he would tell me I had to write down my goals. Whenever I went to camps in the summer before I went away to high school, they always pass you out sheets what are your goals? And I remember writing the Olympics because I knew I'd be crazy if I didn't. But again, my personality was not to think of those things. I did not think about the Olympics. I didn't think about making the ski team. I always just tried to become a better skier. My mission was to always improve, and that made me happy. If I improved and did better, listened to the coaches, that put me in a better mindset. And I figured if I keep improving, things will come my way. And that's honestly what happened. I didn't think about the Olympics until the year of the 92 Olympics, because I finally realized, I'm like, wow, I'm actually in range this Olympic year, and I maybe can make these, and I think I'm good enough. So that was the first time I really paid attention to the Olympics in terms of me making them. And it was a struggle. I barely made them in the sense that it was crazy for someone who doesn't like to think about any of that stuff and just to ski. Well, I started thinking about it all the time. Oh my God, I need to make the Olympics. But I kept telling myself that I really don't care. Don't think about it. And that year I had a horrible season. So I'm in the Europa Cup. And in order to get a second run in Europa Cups, you have to get a top 60. And the year before, I was getting top 10, and I skied great in the Europa Cups, had great results. And so now I'm in the Olympic year, and I'm skiing horrible. I can barely get down the course. I can barely get a second run, which means I'm in the 50s. And I keep telling myself that I don't care. But obviously, if I'm talking to myself that way, I do care. And I had this great coach, Rob Clayton. I think he's one of the best coaches I had. He pulled me aside one day and he said, Wendy, the way you're skiing, you're not going to make the Olympics, so stop thinking about it. And I remembered I felt like a dagger just got pulled out of my lungs and I could breathe again. I'm like, oh my God, I know. I'm like, I'm telling myself not to think about it and I can't stop. And I want to make it for my parents. I want to make it for my relatives who doubted my parents and doubted me and the coaches who doubted me. Like I wanted to make the Olympics for everybody else but me. It was just like a proving point to prove all these people wrong who thought I wasn't good enough. So we had a long talk, which I can't remember all about it, but it was just really great. It was really great that he saw something in me. He could tell, and he just pulled it out and he nailed it. And it just really helped me be able to move past it. And then we had a meeting that night and he said to all of us girls, he said, all right, the next Europa Cup, you have to get a top third in order to go to the next World Cup. We're not going to give any buys. So if you get fourth place, tough. You don't get to go to the World Cup. So now we're at a new venue, and I remember I'm at the start, and it's a really cold, weird day, and my goggles are fogged, and I can't see, and I'm freaking out. And the technician at the top, I keep bugging him, like, Dee, I need to change my lenses. And he didn't have time for me because he had other girls in front of me. And so finally, he can get to me, and I have two people before I have to get in the starting gate. He changes my lens, and I get in the starting gate, and I push out, and I won the run. And I remember just being like, oh my God. And I end up getting second and I go to the next World Cup. I'm starting in the 50s and I end up getting 13th overall in the slalom. And I got named to the Olympic team. And when I look back to my racing past and even my free skiing, I was a head trip. Like the more I thought about the task at hand, the more I thought about skiing and the racing, the worse I did. So the fact that I was distracted with these goggles that I couldn't see out of because they were foggy and no one can change them. And I was freaking out. I had no time to think about trying to do good, no time to think about the Olympics, no time to think about my place, no time to think about mistakes that I could make wrong. Next thing I know, I'm just in the starting gate and I push out and I won. And that's the kind of skier I was. And so I go back to in the beginning when you talked about when I was younger, did I want to kick everyone's butt and think about it? My best results were when I was super, super distracted and had no time to think about me as a skier. And if I just let my natural ability take over, I would do well. If I let my brain get into it, I would do horrible. And, I just reflect back, like I look in terms of my skiing success that I was just more of a natural skier because I just let my body go. I wasn't overly aggressive. Skiing has a lot to do with finesse. You don't need to be the strongest fit person out there. I was fit, but I definitely was not the strongest. And if I could just shut my brain off, I would just do so much better.
And it sounds like that coach makes you figure that out. Like he pulls that dagger out of you. You realize that things can be different if you're not just focusing on winning and what you need to do to win. But when you think about coaches, that's one thing. But I would think with teammates, there should be a level of support there as well. But I'm not sure that happens with the women on the U.S. team at that point. Were there girls that took you under their wing as a mentor when you start on the team? Or is it kind of every woman for themselves and everybody trying to beat the other person? Or how is the relationship with the other women on the team?
The ski team was hard for me. It is where things started to shift and change. The U.S. ski team it's a weird dynamic. It's the U.S. ski team, yet you're an individual athlete, but you're in this team and you have to travel together. You don't get to pick your coaches. And now you're rooming with people who kind of are your direct competitors. And yeah, there were girls who we were all friendly. I mean, I don't feel like any of them hated me, but I also didn't feel super close to anyone. I did in the early years, the training team years, when there's 15 of us traveling together, half of us get along and we laugh and we play and we wrestle at the start and goof around, but I kept climbing the ladder and they didn't. And so I'm climbing the ladder, and the people you travel with become less and less. And so you're just kind of with a handful of girls, and I don't have anything bad to say about them, but I also didn't feel a connection. And it's crazy. I started journaling from 1989 to 94, 95. I journaled. And I recently just read them because I went to my son's school, Apex, to do some mentoring with their girls. And I thought about, well, if I'm going to mentor, maybe I should read these journals. And they've been burning in my brain for the last few years. Like, they're in this box in this corner and I can feel them. Like, I need to open them and read them. What's in them? But I kept putting it off. But when I got asked to come and mentor the girls at Axel's school, I'm like, well, maybe I should read these journals so I can understand who I was back then better. And I mean, they were awful. They're super depressing to read. I was very sad. I was very lonely, bored. I did read a lot of books, but again, you have to think about, we're traveling in Europe and we don't have Netflix.
Right.
You know, you can't do online schooling. So I wrote in my journals, I was bored a lot. I didn't really have a fun time with my teammates, did not feel much support from them. It was, for me, I felt I was very alone. And I know some teammates had great connections, but they were older than me. And I had one teammate that we roomed together a lot. And then all of a sudden she stopped talking to me, or maybe I stopped talking to her. I don't know. So now you're in a room with someone who you're not even talking with anymore. Now I'm at a start, bored out of my mind. Everyone is so serious and visualizing the course over and over so much that I'm just like, oh my God, someone tell me a joke, you know? One of my other best races is after my downhill crash. So I went to the Olympics and I qualified for the downhill slalom combined and giant slalom. And I had a horrible crash in the downhill portion. Flew about 140 feet, had a concussion, ragdolled down the face, ended up doing a screaming seaman. Well, I got into the screaming, but never got out. So my legs were like crossed as I finalized my tumbling and come to a stop. And I have 215s on. Hurt both my MCLs, broke my thumb, cracked a rib, bruised my ankle bone, and suffered a concussion. But I came back the next year and I'm in the opening World Cup. And again, I'm struggling mentally, just not happy, but I'm still having success enough to be in the opening World Cup. But I'm struggling with my brother's death, letting people down. And I get to the start and I just remember thinking to myself, I just don't know if I can do this anymore. And I'm starting in the 40s and I get in the starting gate and my old ski tech is in there. And he's like, Wendy. I'm like, oh my God. And I was so excited to see him. He started joking around. He's telling me to pick my wedgie because I always did that before the start. And I fidgeted with my goggles and all this stuff. And we literally talked as I pushed out of the starting gate and I came down in 5th place. Huh. And again, I just needed to be happy. I needed to have fun. I wanted to just have friends. And I wasn't really feeling any of that when I was traveling on the U.S. ski team. You know, I mentioned that great coach, Rob Clayton. He's the B team coach. Then I'd get bumped up to the A team. And that coach I just didn't connect with. And he wasn't great to me. He didn't help me perform. He didn't know my ins and outs like the other coach did to help elevate my ski level. So now I'm hitting a cement wall with this guy. So I start to ski bad again, get pushed back down to the B team. And Rob builds me back up to the A team. But now I'm with this joker who doesn't give me the time of day. And that doesn't make you feel great either. So it was such a huge battle. I was so excited when I made the ski team. I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to be on the ski team for 10 years. That was my goal. I guess my only one goal. That's just envisioned. I was so excited. And I made it 7 years, but I struggled for the last 3 or 4 of them. I barely held on.
I mean, it also seems like the U.S. ski team is political. And towards the end of your time on the team, I think there was Hillary Lynn, Peekaboo Street. They were kind of coming up in their career and getting to their peaks, it seemed like. And they have more prototypical bodies for ski races, it seems like, compared to you. And that's no slight on yourself, but just if you're to look at a prototypical ski racer, what they're supposed to look like, Peekaboo had that more so than yourself. And she was really coming into her own at that point. And with the Olympics coming up again in '94, there's a chance for you to make the team, but do you feel that politics of the whole team were pushing you out of the way, considering that there were younger, stronger people coming into play?
No, I mean, the only political issue I had is the 18 coach sucked. And I just really couldn't feel like I could advance. I was right there with Peekaboo. We're the same age. Our careers have been alongside each other forever. So I wouldn't say that she had this overpowering push by me because of politics. I was mentally losing my shit. I look back at my career and I was such a mental mess. It was unfortunate. And I can look back now and see that. And it does bum me out because I feel I could have made the 94 Olympics, but because my head was such a mess. And I saw tons of therapists. 2 different therapists labeled me as manic depressive. And I didn't even know that. I just read those in my journal and I looked it up, which is, I guess, considered bipolar, which I don't think I have that. But I was an emotional roller coaster. I really couldn't get my shit together. So I reflect back and I'm bummed about that. I really just don't know how I could have got helped because, like I said, I did see therapists. But when you're in that state, and it kind of goes back to Dean, sometimes you can't get out of it. You're in such a tunnel and you're missing the exits or you're not willing to take them when they're there. So, you just kind of feel trapped. And I just couldn't figure out how to get out of it because when I didn't have great friends on the team, like I said, I didn't feel like I had anyone to talk to. A lot of girls on the team complained and talked about shit and I hated it. So I didn't want to be that person. I never talked about my feelings ever. Like if people hear this podcast, they'd be clueless I ever felt this way. So I was really, really trapped. And, I got into skiing because it was fun. And then towards the end, all I started to do was daydream about my days of squaw, free skiing, and how fun skiing used to be and where did that go. When it came to the end, I started having nightmares at night, a lot that involved death, which is horrible. I think I went to my head coach. I told him this. I'm like, I'm having nightmares all the time. I can barely get down a course. I don't know what's wrong with me. And he said, well, Wendy, I think you should take a year off. You should go to college, race in college, have fun, and ski your way back on the team. And I said this to myself, not to him, but I said, there's no effing way I'm ever coming back here. And that's how I left the ski team. I don't think it was political. I think I had the skiing talent totally to have gone further. But yeah, that was my skiing talent. My brain talent was not there.
And you didn't have the right coach in position to kind of steer you in the right direction to forget about the shit. Because it sounds like when you're on the B team, the coach knew how to work with you, but on the A team, the coach didn't know what to do with you.
Totally. Yeah. So this is, maybe it's my mistake. Maybe it's the ski team's mistake or all the coaches in my past life. But when I got to the A team, the coach said, all right, girls, we're going to ski slalom today. And I kind of raised my hand. I was like, well, how many runs do you want us to take? And he goes, Wendy, I don't know. You're on the World Cup now. You should know how to coach yourself. And it was such a slap in the face because, again, I'm the one who doesn't ruffle feathers. Like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. I'm a pleaser. Like, tell me how many runs to do. Tell me what to work on. I didn't want to make myself have to come up with a game plan. I just like being told what the game plan is. And I would do it. And that worked for me. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, wow, no one's ever told me how to coach myself. I don't know what I should be doing. So I remember the next day, girls were going in after 3 runs. And I'm like, why are they going in? Should I be going in? What should I be working on? I just was at a loss. And then I went to them one time and my slalom skiing could be amazing. Again, that's my best World Cup result, but I could really ski it like shit too. And my B team coach would set me a course just to help me get my timing back. And then I would pop back into the other course with all the other girls and I would feel great again. So I told the A team coach this. I said, Rob usually sets me a course to help me get my timing back. He goes, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And you know what? I didn't know my rights. Can I go complain to someone else? Who do I talk to? I just felt really, really lost. And so I would say my ski career up until the ski team was amazing. And my early years on the ski team were as well. And then it just became what I wasn't hoping or expecting. And it was kind of a letdown because I feel like I had so much more in me, but I didn't know how to get there. I just felt like I was stuck. So it led to a lot of, again, my eating disorder, a lot of depression, a lot of, I hate to say it, but suicidal thoughts. It was really a devastating time. So when I quit, I knew I wasn't going to try to make my way back on the ski team. I had no desire to go back there.
All right, well, that is heavy stuff, and that is how we're going to end this part of the podcast because we have so much more to talk about in your life and times, and we might as well end it with the end of the ski team, but that's not how my podcasts end, Wendy. I have something called Inappropriate Questions, and I get someone that you know to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything as long as they're inappropriate, and I was able to get the vice president of the IFSA, a person that you and I hung out with at the Palisades in Tahoe when you were winning your second golden saucer at the Payne McConkey. I'm talking about Lhotse Hawk, and she is not afraid to ask fun questions. Are you ready for question number 1 from Lhotse?
No, I'm not.
All right, here we go.
Wendy, tell us the most embarrassing bridal shower gift you received, who it was from, and did you ever use it?
Oh my God, that's really a long time ago. God, that was 22 years ago, I'd say. It's so funny. Let me think. So there's only 2 presents I can really remember really well. One was 2 pie plates from Crested Butte that I still use today, so I think about them all the time. And the other one was Kim Reichhelm gave me a vibrator, which was super inappropriate, being that it was my bridal shower that had my mom there, my aunts there, my cousins. It kind of seemed more of a bachelorette gift.
But you still use it today just like your pie plates?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We'll just leave it there. Well, yeah, it's had a decent use. And I think about it. I think about Kim every time I use it.
All right, I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah, no.
All right, we will go with our second inappropriate question.
Did you ever kiss Shane McConkey? Or did you want to?
No, I never kissed Shane, but yes, I wanted to. I adored him. I mean, I thought he was a great, special person, but I almost feel like it was more of a brotherly sister relationship. So I look to him more in that way. So yes, I wish I kissed him, but I'm also glad I never did because I feel like we had a different connection and bond.
Fair enough. All right, we're going to go with our third inappropriate question. I would normally say final here, but there's a bonus one, so I'm going to go with third right now.
Wendy, what's the worst rule you ever broke at Burke Academy?
Now, it sounds like you were kind of a goody-goody there, and you weren't really breaking the rules.
I think I watched TV in someone's room. I mean, I literally broke no rules. Mm-mm.
All right, well, that's good because he's got a bonus question, so we're going to jump into that one right now.
Wendy, we know you're not a laying girl, but did you ever give head in ski boots?
Super inappropriate. No one's asked anything like that before, but I think, were you on Head ski boots when you were sponsored by a ski boot brand?
No, I'm on Head right now.
Okay.
So Head is my sponsor now, and I ski on their boots, and I love them. I was a lane girl. I was a Nordica girl. But yes, I don't know where she's going with the head question. Obviously, somewhere that I'm not going to take my mind to, and just do a shout out to Head and how awesome their boots are.
What's your husband's name?
Woody.
Okay, I just felt like I'd say that, just to tie that into the whole thing.
Yeah.
So that is Inappropriate Questions, and that is part 1 of the podcast. We're going to jump into a part 2 in the coming days, weeks. I don't know. I'll talk to you after this, and we'll figure it out. But Wendy, your life and times is amazing. I'm excited to talk about the next part of it. That's really when I became a big fan of yours. I wasn't really into the racing as much as I am into the big mountains and the movies that you were a part of, and it's going to be exciting to talk about that. But really awesome to hear about your story. You're very open, and I love it. So thank you for your time, and we will talk again soon.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. And look forward to it.
So that was time with Wendy Fisher, and holy shit, there was so much going on in episode 1. It was a heavy episode. There's no real way to sum up what the loss of losing a sibling is like, other than saying it's heavy. And then things really don't get that much easier for Wendy throughout this whole episode. Sure, she hit her goals of making the U.S. ski team and the Olympic team, but the side effects of that were depression and eating disorder and suicidal thoughts. It's like, thank you, U.S. ski team, for all of these problems. And in part 2 of the podcast, we talk about the problems, the career change, and the glory Wendy found on the big screen. It's the redemption episode with a pioneer in the big mountains. That's the show for this week. At this point, I want to ask you to review me wherever you listen. Whether it's a star rating or a full-on review, I greatly appreciate it. And if I read it on the show, I will send you a limited edition Powell Movement beanie. All you need to do is email me if you hear me read your review on the podcast. I also want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement and check out the brands who make this show happen. By supporting them, they'll continue to support me and the show will continue to go on. Those brands are Rollerblade, Elon Skis, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Have a great week, everyone.